Okay.
And then I can add to it if you like.
Sure.
So we are really delighted to have Esther Gokley with us today. She is a Princeton alumna, and she is world known for developing this 8-step procedure to pain-free back. She is an accomplished author, and really people come to her from across the world to relearn how to have the right posture when sitting and standing, and hopefully this can help us avoid some spinal issues. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I have tremendous respect for what you do. I happen personally to have otosclerosis. I've had one ear operated, the other one is overdue. So I have particularly high respect for what goes on in this sphere. And for all of your knowledge, your medical knowledge, and your expertise, you are a product of a modern culture, most of you. And we have been subject to modern furniture, modern guidelines around how you conduct how you inhabit your body. And I am going to make a claim, which I hope I can shore up, that we really haven't been served well by our culture, posturally. It used to be that the guidelines around diet were not very informed. And in recent years, we've come to realize, oops, we made a mistake. You know, fat was the bad guy. It turns out it wasn't really the bad guy. Sugar's the bad guy, and so on. And we are making modifications. In posture, it's much worse. Like, we really have, like, the popular guidelines are not only unhelpful, but counterproductive. Sit up straight, stand up straight, chin up, chest out, tuck your pelvis, S-shaped spine, crunches to strengthen your abdominals. I'm going to claim that each one of those guidelines is counterproductive. And I think I can convince you of that. So it begins very early in life. Day one, coming home from the hospital. This is a typical car seat that your baby, and if you're young enough, you were placed into, right? And then maybe your parents thought that it would be good if you were left sleeping, and so they kind of struggled to keep you in that car seat in the restaurant. And so kids can spend quite some time in this kind of structure, and it doesn't take a lot of sophistication to see that there's something wrong here, right? So these are the months when the human brain learns what sitting means. And we're teaching our babies that this is what sitting is. And then it's not that surprising that when they grow to be school age, that they sit exactly in that shape. So this is a C shape, you could say, yeah? And it includes a tucked pelvis, and then on top of that, everything curves fairly uniformly forward. And at this age, parents can usually see something's not right. And then what is the fix? What would a typical parent tell their kid who's not sitting very well, who's sitting like this? What would be the...
Stand up straight.
Exactly.
Sit up
Or
straight.
sit up straight. Smack.
My mom would hit my back.
Dig elbows into the back. Pull your shoulders back is another one. All of those involve contracting some muscle, right? The erector spinae muscles. Sticking out the chest, maybe. Chin up. Yeah. pulling the shoulders back, and after a while those muscles get tired, maybe sore, and then the person goes back to slumping. Most people, in fact, go back and forth between being upright and tense, which they imagine is good posture. Yeah, this is where the idea comes from, that good posture is a big effort, right? Because we think we have to strain some muscle to be upright. Now, in fact, it's a hack. Yeah? If you start with this kind of posture and tense up the erector spinae muscle, you're going to have an S-shaped spine that passes for good posture, but it correlates with a whole bunch of spinal problems. All kinds of compressive issues here. So disc degeneration, and you've got these unnatural curves. I'm going to argue they're unnatural. But they're common enough that they get mistaken for average and even ideal. Yeah? So the S-shaped spine is what we are all trained in, yeah, is the normal spinal shape and so on. So more about that later. But, kid who sits like this through their school years is going to grow up and sit like that through their working years. So if you look in Silicon Valley, this is the most common posture you will see. Tucked pelvis, relaxed and slumped spine, and then some kind of strain in the neck to look out ahead, usually, right? And you see this everywhere. So this is in your very own hospital. And so this surgeon already has one neck surgery, but, has not learned how to be as an neurosurgeon. And so that's who you would go to if you had a really serious problem. But it doesn't, even at that level where there's the most sophisticated knowledge about the spine, no idea how to sit and how to stand and how to bend and how to be in the body. That's a huge cultural gap. And we suffer for it. So, these are two Portuguese horsemen, both relaxed and sitting very differently. Yeah? How would you describe this guy? Slumped. His head is forward, his shoulders are forward, and this guy?
Erect.
Same level of relaxation, he's upright. Okay? So this is So now that I've shown you these earlier pictures, what do you notice? Because someone who hasn't reflected on posture would say sit up straight, right? Tense, and he would do it by tensing up his erector spinae muscles. He'd arch up. After a while, he'd get tired. He'd go back. Yeah. So this guy just remains upright. So the key difference between them is their pelvic position. And the easy way to see it is to imagine that they have tails. Where would you say this guy's imaginary tail is?
Between his legs.
Between his legs. He's sitting on it. Yeah? And this guy's imaginary tail? Out behind him. Yeah? So the technical name is anteverted pelvis. I like that term because nobody has co-opted it to mean other things. You hear forward pelvis, which is a fairly meaningless term, and anterior pelvis, which comes out to just mean your pelvis is slanted relative to the floor. It doesn't tell you anything about where the angle is. Yeah? So it could be, from my point of view, a healthy thing, or it could be a really unhealthy thing. And it's called the same thing, forward pelvis. So I don't use those terms. Older term, anteverted pelvis, retare, rotated, anti-forward pelvis bowl, forward rotated bowl. And if that piece of you is like your foundation, and if you get your foundation right, then the building blocks that are your vertebrae have the option to stack without much muscular tension. And that's very valuable because now when you breathe, for example, there's no inhibition to the lungs expanding in this vertical direction, and there's a natural kind of massage-like action that happens in the spine just as a byproduct of breathing. So your spine has the option to be in motion all day long in the background without you having to exercise all day. You know, we have other things to do too. Carries precious cargo. Nice to have it in motion. Nature has taken care of that. It can be in motion just from you breathing well with the right stacking. The moment there's tension in the erector spinae muscles and other muscles, then that's undermined. Then it's kind of stuck. No motion. And that motion stimulates circulation and helps with healing. You know, there's natural wear and tear. So you need a system that's going to heal this very important part of our anatomy. So if you tuck your pelvis, you've got two options. You can relax and slump, or you can be upright, and they're both problematic. So I do speak from personal experience. That's my MRI, from a much less happy time. So I was in my mid-20s, and I know that you people are not orthopedic surgeons, but I think everyone can see very clearly that this is not a good situation. It's an enormous herniation, L5S1, and the radiologist said, wow, that's the worst one I've seen all year. And that explained why I was feeling like I had an ice pick in my butt, radiating pain all the way down to my toes. So this started in the 9th month of pregnancy, first pregnancy. And it was horrendous. You know, it's like at the beginning I thought, oh, maybe the baby's sitting on a nerve root. I was told that. Baby born, it stayed as bad, and it got worse, and I couldn't carry my baby, and I couldn't carry a cooking pot, and I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at night without waking up in spasm, and then having to, I didn't want to take pain meds because I was nursing, and I didn't want to introduce meds into my system, and so I just suffered, and I was trying all the usual conventional things and alternative things, physical therapy, acupuncture, acupressure, massage, stretching, strengthening, yoga, me checking my head, you name it, you try it, you're desperate, and it's very bad. And then finally I had surgery. I had a laminectomy, discectomy, L5S1. They took out the extruded portion, they dug in some of the content of the disc to prevent re-herniation, and I was better. Not entirely, I still had twinges and so on, and then a year later, in spite of me following all the directions and doing all the recommended exercises, I had that disc re-herniate. And now they're proposing another surgery, and I'm in my mid-20s, so this is not looking good. And I've also been told you have a weak back, recommend no more kids, and that was not my original plan. And so it was really not a good situation. You know, multiple surgeries in your mid-20s doesn't bode well. Yeah, it's weakening. And so what you can see in my spinal shape is the typical S-shaped curve, the bottom of, and so I was never called on my posture. This is considered normal. This is definitely in the normal range. If you look at, let me show you, yeah, if you look at any modern anatomy text, that's about how much curve there is in the lumbar spine. We're supposed to have S-shaped curve, natural lumbar curve. That's why you have lumbar support in your car seat. This is why every ergonomic chair has, this is actually not bad because it's quite low, but very often it's a little higher and it's exaggerated ergonomic chairs to support the so-called natural lumbar curve. And that's what I had. And so, you know, nobody told me like, hey, your spinal architecture could use some improvement, some upgrade. I just did all the usual fixes, right? And they're not effective. You look at the research. I mean, this is the number one cause of global disability, lower back pain. And I know surgeons have more trouble with upper back and neck issues, but also with lower back pain. Anyway, number one cause of global disability. And there's nothing that's very effective. The best things help you a little bit at the margins, and we don't know what the heck is going on. 85% of back pain is called non-specific back pain, which my friend DJ Kennedy, who used to be in the orthopedic surgery department here and now he's chair at Vanderbilt, he told me that's just a euphemism for we don't know what the heck is going on, because the GPs don't really understand back pain, right? That was his. So it's a pretty dismal state of affairs, considering that it's the number one cause of global disability. Nothing works particularly well. We don't understand why people have it. When they get better, we have no idea what changed exactly. One of the less proud areas of modern medicine, just not doing that well. If you go back in time and look at older anatomy books, you see a very different shaped spine. Now, this comes from a text published in 1911. So I coined the phrase J spine to distinguish it from what is currently considered normal, the S spine. Yeah? And the claim is that that's actually the right model. That's the right paradigm that we need to be using to design our furniture around, to give people directions on what to do in their body, to reshape people, to rod them if that's what's needed, and so on. We really need to get our paradigm upgraded. Yeah? And it's very hard to change a paradigm. Like the earth was flat for 600 years before, with the mounting evidence, we upgraded that paradigm and decided it was round after all. So it's once you have something in place, then all the furniture is built around it, and people develop their traditions and their guidelines. And even if it's just plain wrong, it takes a lot to upend that. But it's quite obvious that this doesn't make sense. Like just from commonsensical grounds, these discs are all cylindrical. What would they be doing in a wedge-shaped space at the baseline? That's a little strange, right? This last disc, L5S1, is wedge-shaped. So that's what changed when we became bipedal. That's the thing that evolved the most. Yeah, and now that it's a wedge-shaped disc, when your behind's behind, you're giving that wedge-shaped disc a wedge-shaped space. That's a good fit. When you tuck your pelvis, which is a very common guideline, and which this model is doing, then you are squishing the front edge of the wedge. You're pushing the contents backwards, that direction. Yeah? So I was very masterful at doing this, as you can see in my MRI. My L5S1 disc is not being given a wedge-shaped home to live in. I've squeezed the front edge, and I've managed to do that very diligently and pushed all the contents out back, and it is sitting right up against my spinal cord and causing tremendous misery and a whole different trajectory for my life, except that I was lucky. I cast a wider and wider net, and I was lucky because I grew up in India, half Indian, half Dutch. And my mom was an Indophile, and she used to just always admire the sweeper who could sit on her haunches and sweep the whole house and not be in pain. And these people out on the streets were carrying baskets of heavy stuff and not in trouble. And, she's Dutch. She grew up in a cold country. She got us all into yoga, and she noticed that the villagers have these incredible teeth, dentition, and what are they eating differently? And she, some kooky ideas, some amazing insights. She combed high and low for unpolished rice. All of our 4 kids got to, be entertained by all her discoveries, and we got packed off to yoga. Anyway, she developed an eye for there's something going on with these people who live in very traditional ways, and they have some kind of kinesthetic wisdom that gets passed down. So that lodged. So when I had this kind of trouble and I was failing at all the conventional and alternative things and being told no more kids and second surgery, and it's like, whoa. So as I was looking wider and wider, the things that resonated for me were the things that point you to your own body. There's something you can do. It's not another Band-Aid that you need. And long story short, by doing all the things that I've written about, and please feel free to circulate the book. I just brought a couple of copies. And you can see, just by flipping through it, you get the flavor of it, that it's informed by these kind of populations, indigenous populations, ancestral populations, little kids, and that there's a step-by-step process that is definitely not sit up straight. It's not like it has some depth, it has some breadth, there are things you need to learn, there's a step-by-step progression on how you change. So one of the things, the first, I needed to angle this L5S1 juncture more, but based on now 3 decades of experimenting and teaching and trying different orders and different metaphors and how do you get from here to there, we've discovered lots of things. So one of the things is you want to do this part first. You want to first lengthen the spine. You want to put some traction. It's a little bit like if you want to make a pot, you start by massaging the clay, by making the clay malleable. You don't just push the clay around to change the shape of it. Yeah? So with the human structure, you want to prepare the muscles, you want to create some space, you lengthen, you put some traction in the system. And that is actually well known. There are a lot of devices like inversion tables, and chiropractors sometimes have these tables where you're half an hour you're stretched out. And I think it's the right idea, but the wrong extent. Because if you really want to stretch out those muscles that have for decades been tightened to sit you up straight and so on, it takes hours, not minutes. Yeah? Hanging from a bar, you can't do enough to really make a difference. So in the Gokla method, our approach, we have 2 low-hanging juicy fruit for techniques to start people out, like to put them in traction. And one is, anytime you're sitting, most people sit a lot, hours and hours, right? And the time you spend lying, that's not as many hours as maybe you'd like or should have, but still, hours and hours. So those are 2 low-hanging juicy fruit that you can capture to put yourself in traction. And it takes very little training, and I'd like to ask for a volunteer who I can show how you would sit with your back in traction. So if someone has a bit of a sway or has an achy low back, you'd be a good candidate, and I will teach you. Any volunteers, please?
Should I take off my jacket?
Take off your jacket is a good idea, and I'll sit you here. And I'm going
You're gonna get your back cracked, Sam. You're gonna get your back cracked, Sam.
That's easy.
that used to be you.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I touch your back just
It's
briefly? Okay, so you do have a little bit of a sway.
Mhm.
Does it give you some trouble sometimes?
I do
or-
have some, tightness, operating and when I twist and do stuff,
So you're always on a slant. Okay. Well, another thing, you learn all these things by working for years and years and years. And so one of the things we've discovered is a lot of people come in with asymmetries. And the human eye is incredibly we're adapted to recognize asymmetry. Yeah, so that people know about their asymmetries, and practitioners totally see the asymmetries. What they don't see is the front to back distortions. So a lot gets blamed on asymmetry, I think disproportionately. So I think people, because that's what we see. We don't know, if you don't know the front to back stuff, then you're gonna think like, oh, this person has pain because of the asymmetry. But in my experience, if you approach the system symmetrically, number one, half the asymmetry disappeared, the acquired part. To whatever extent someone has genetic asymmetry, no one can do anything about that. But the acquired asymmetry, from leaning into your curves, from your professional posture, from muscles get weak and you lean more into your curves, that can be actually reversed, and it's most efficient to reverse it by using symmetric measures, like sitting with traction, lying with traction. So I'm going to invite you to have a seat. This chair has a built-in stretch sit element. It's all these rubbery nubs, and my approach, I'm quite proud to say, is not very product heavy. It's about education heavy. But given how much people sit, it's useful to have some device to put you in traction. So the way we would do it is you hinge away. I'm going to put you sideways so they can see. And you hinge away. You put your bottom well back in the chair. That's good. And then you hinge away from the nubbies. So the whole back hinges forward. So you clear the nub. And then you're going to use two techniques to add some extra length. Okay? First technique is going to be pivoting your rib cage. We call it rib anchor. So you're doing the opposite of the sit-up straight thing.
Yeah.
You're
Feels like I'm leaning forward.
and you are, just momentarily. And then you take your hands somewhere on the chair, hand. You can push here, you can push there, you can push on any part of the chair. And now you're going to push your back tall without undoing the first measure, the pivot. So you're going to add length to the back. There we go. And then you're going to find the nubbies and you're going to let go. And if we've succeeded, and we have, then there's a pinch of skin above the point of contact. That's proof that we have managed to stretch your skin out, which stretches the flesh, which eases the vertebrae apart. And I'm just going to do what we call a shoulder roll, which is that's something I'd like all of you to do, because this is so helpful if you work with your hands. You go a little forward, one shoulder at a time, and then you make an arch, and you kind of think of it as ratcheting the soft tissue back, and then you relax. And you totally relax. You don't pull your shoulders back. So most people think, like, if they have forward shoulders, the way they need to fix that is by pulling the shoulders back. Well, that lasts about 10 seconds. And it's an unhealthy way to go about doing it anyway. You don't want to constantly tense your rhomboids to be pulling back. You're going to get inflamed at their attachment. Yeah? So don't pull your shoulders back. It's not going to work anyway. And it's going to, inflame your tissues. If you do that, this is the simplest and easiest thing we teach, is you do this shoulder roll. There's nuance to be learned. You want to externally rotate the arm while you're doing it. And now you totally relax. And your arms, if you were sitting, you would just rest your arms someplace. But you specifically do not pull back. You do as relaxed as slumping. And what you notice is that it's very sustainable. Yeah? There's no pull coming forward. You can just relax, forget about it, do your operation, and I recommend you practice a little bit ahead on something else before. But that is the way. All your predecessors going back, 100 years, were operating with their shoulders back here. Yeah, I'll show you pictures. They didn't do this. Yeah? And that makes So that's how you keep your blood flow good, that's how you keep your breathing good, that's how you prevent what's otherwise going to become an increasingly hunched spine, right? So, it's feeling okay? Can you
Yeah.
feel the traction?
Yeah, it felt like, yeah, the back, the lower back just kind of stretched and straightened a little bit, yeah.
And that's the entire point of this, is you are stretching your skin, it stretches the flesh, and that eases the vertebrae apart, and that is step one before you start remodeling and putting your bum back or anything like that. Yeah? So you have to create some space because like you remember my spine, if I started by putting my bum back, I'd just sequestrate that disc, right? That wouldn't be so good. That's what happened anyway, actually, but anyway, that's another story. You want to create space for everything before you start remodeling. So this is a relatively easy thing to do, and as surgeons, I suggest you put it on your bucket list to invest a few minutes to learn this technique so that like on your way home in your car, you are stretch sitting. So you're resetting whatever mischief happened in terms of compression and discs dehydrated and nerves impinged and whatever better architecture you put into this area is going to play up the chain. Yeah? So if you look, like this could be any of us, right? Happens to be my third child. So the story ends well, right? I remember I wasn't supposed to have any more kids. I had number 2 and number 3, no event whatsoever. Yeah? No pain, no twinge, no ache, and it's been 35 years, 0. But you can see how this part of the spine is really quite flat. None of this so-called natural lumbar curve throughout the upper lumbar. And right now your back doesn't have that curve. Yeah? We've stretched it out and your brain is getting used to this architecture so that when you stand and we invest a little more time in helping you recapture that architecture, it won't feel so strange anymore. Yeah? So that's an additional function. You're stretching the muscles, you're letting the discs hydrate, you're giving the nerves more room, but you're also getting your brain used to this, so it stops feeling so strange. You're welcome.
Great,
Thank you very much.
Very much.
So it's not just little kids who have this architecture, it's all ancestral populations. If you go back in time and you look at old photographs, if you're so lucky as to have like, you know, ancestors from like 3 generations ago when photography just started, you will find that they have this kind of open upper body architecture, and if they have like their behinds behind you, go to the museum, look at old statues, look at old paintings, J-spine, yeah? Big angle at L5S1, pretty flat on up, yeah? And the place we start is here. And then we learn how to keep that part stable, and then we start remodeling this part. That order is important. So this could be someone from one of your, you know, like family albums. And it's nice to grow old this way, then you can actually do stuff instead of just hurt. So notice his shoulders open, notice his behind. His legs turned out, you know, modern times we have parallel legs. It sounds right, you know, human beings like symmetry, 90-degree angle. People make it up. Parallel feet sounds plausible, but based on what? You know, people just make stuff up that sounds plausible, but it's really not evidence-based. If you look at these kind of populations, I have 10,000 images, and everybody's got their feet turned slightly out, which is the basis for me teaching modern people to have their feet slightly turned out. When you're standing, when you're walking, yeah, when you're running. So this is another population that we use as models, this kind of population. So indigenous people, non-industrial cultures, basically. So I've traveled, tribal Africa, village, Portugal, rural India, places where they don't have, this is the Ubang tribesmen in Borneo. So you see that same J-spine, pronounced angle at L5S1, and really not much curve here. And then shoulders straight back, neck is tall. Again, you see the feet turned out, the whole legs externally rotated. That's actually what gives the pelvis room to settle well. A lot of people, especially young people who are, umbrella strollers and stuff, the legs are trained to internally rotate. And if you have internally rotated legs, your pelvis doesn't have room to go where it belongs. You're stuck with the tug. You can see my belt line is horizontal. It takes externally rotating the legs, which takes reshaping the feet is the way we teach it. Yeah, that's the most efficient way to get the whole Jing Bang Law reorganized. Yeah, otherwise you're going to work on each little piece. But if you work on the feet, boom, the legs externally rotate, and then you've got room for, so it looks like this within your shoes. You can hopefully do this. So instead of being, like a lot of people show up kind of like this, maybe they have bunions, they have knock knees, they have knee problems, whatever, and by reshaping the feet, I'm going to show if you want to see how it looks, what we do with the feet. So if people come in with like, parallel feet and some kind of bunion, flat feet, pronated feet, very common, then you want to, so you raise your heel. Can you see how I'm changing the shape of my foot? And with it, can you see that my leg is, like I'm changing every joint in my lower body. And I'm creating passage for the pelvis, which then allows the rest of me to stack better. Yeah? So I'll show you my spine now. You saw my MRI from when I was 27. That was many moons ago. So I have 2 wearables on my body right now. So we, in our long project, we invented 2 wearables. So one is a 5-sensor wearable. You can see down on my midline, on the spine. And the other one is a 2-sensor. Ignore that one for now. The 5-sensors one is talking to our app. So I don't know how well you can see over here, but I'm going to sit in my current way, right? Very different from how I sat in the days when that MRI. In those days, I did the sit-up straight thing and I was complimented for my great posture. And in fact, it was terrible. And like age mid-20s, back surgery, pretty bad, right? So right now, this is what my spine looks like. Can you see? So how would you describe the shape? J, right? This is definitely more J than S, right? So I'm going to mark it. I'm going to say this is good. Good job, Esther. And I'm going to mark an ideal. So now when I depart, I can see. Can you see that I've marked what I think is a good shape? And I'm going to show you against this what I used to do, which was to sit up straight. Like this is how I used to sit. Very big departure. And to get an idea of what that does to the insides of me, we have another view on this. So that's a simulation of what's going on the inside of me. Pretty accurate. Yeah? And now I'll show you what I used to do and what happens in there. So what do we see? Right? And that's pretty much what I was doing all day. Right? Like arching my back and causing all that compression. Yeah. So then we use this to get a baseline of people's sitting, standing when we teach. individuals like get a baseline of their sitting, standing, bending posture, and then when they make changes, like after a month or so, or even after a week, then we look at the change shape. And we've published numerous papers on the change in people's shape, spinal shape, based on our instruction. And what's cool is that, that the most important problem to solve is fix people's pain, right? It's ridiculous that everybody's hurting and we have an 85% incidence of back pain. But it's also really nice to solve the problem that we don't know what the heck is going on when people get better. And so we've published studies showing that, yes, we are changing people's spinal shape, and that we haven't proved it yet, but it's highly suggestive, and we're busy, showing that that's what's correlating with their improved results. So we have a randomized controlled trial that has just begun. So the chief of PM&R, Matt Smook, I don't know if people know each other, Matthew Smook is at Stanford, and he was intrigued by numerous pieces of our picture. So one, he liked that we have these published results on changed spinal shape. Because he's a wearables person actually. But he also liked, there's a crowdsourcing website called healthoutcome.org that has gathered data on like 40 some interventions that are used for back pain. So the guy spent a couple of $1 million on Facebook ads about a decade ago. Simple ads. Do you have lower back pain? Share your experience and learn from others. And being a good statistician, he got oodles of data out of people, asking them one question at a time. And what have you tried? And how well did it work? Cured, almost cured, improved, not improved, worsened. And he's got all of this pulled together. Now, he couldn't monetize, and he ended his website. So it's in Wayback Machine, in the web archive, but it's still there. The data is still there. And ours was the #1 rated intervention for lower back pain by a huge margin. The chance of a cure or almost cure is 50 times higher than the runner-up, than the #2 rated. So it looks good, right? Like there's something funny going on here, is that unusually effective. So it turns out we are in fact helping people go from either an S shape or a C shape spine to more of a J spine. And and we think the mechanism is that, yes, these discs now have a appropriately shaped intervertebral disc space to fit into, and the L5S1 disc has a wedge-shaped disc, and so on. Most studies on spinal shape kind of miss the mark. They just lump it all together, like lumbar curve, one number, and then come to the conclusion there's not a correlation between lumbar curvature and back pain. And they go even further, like very highly respected physical therapists claim there's no correlation between posture and back pain based on those kind of studies. This is a study that actually makes a distinction between upper and lower lumbar curve. So, and they took 100 back pain patients and 100 patients who didn't have back pain, and basically find that the back pain patients have more of an S-shaped curve, right? More curve up top, less below. And the volunteer, the non-back pain, the normals, have more of a J-spine, more curve down below and less up top. So this was hard to find, any study that distinguish between upper and lower lumbar curve. So very validating of what we're talking about. There's also very, very little data on like village folk and non-industrial cultures. So this one is, this guy took his X-ray machine in the middle to the Bhil tribals in central India. And on the x-axis you have age, on the y-axis you have disc narrowing, a measure of degeneration of the discs. This was a sedentary, these are 3 studies put together in this graph. So this is computer workers, sedentary workers, and sure enough, with age, we see that their discs degenerate. And this is the basis for all those sticky sound bites like sitting is the new smoking, sitting kills you. But if you look at the statistics for the manual workers, I mean, if you are not going to do a computer job, you're probably doing something manual to earn your living, and the stats are way worse. So it's not really fair to blame sitting. It's just a kind of media trend. It's not really, I mean, nobody does well in modern times. With an 85% incidence of back pain, no one's sitting, standing, manual labor, no one's doing well. And where you really want to be is here, where the discs of the 50-year-olds are indistinguishable from the 20-year-olds. Yeah? So it becomes very, and what are they doing? Because genetically, human beings don't vary much. There's more variation in the, in one band of chimpanzees in the Congo than across the entire human race. Yeah, we didn't change that much, and certainly not in things like spinal shape. So I'm suggesting that what's going on here is these people are using their bodies differently. So I'll give you an example, and I want to invite you all to stand up. And so if you, everybody has sometimes have heavy lifting to do or something. So start with what I'm going to call a ready position. So a ready position, if you were playing tennis, would look like this, right? We're not playing tennis. We're playing the sport of life. So the sport of life, you don't be like that. But neither do you want to be like this. Parked in your joints, locked knees, locked groin, all really parked in all your joints and degenerating them all through the spine and so on. So you want to have a little give at your knees, at your groin. Yeah, so it's kind of not ready like tennis, but still a little bit ready. And now, imagine, this is the quickest way I know to engage the right combo of abdominal muscles. Because a lot of people ab, core, engage your core, and what do? They kind of tuck, right? Now, if I tuck, suppose I'm standing like this, and this is good. I'm going to say, this is good. And now, if I tuck, right, I'm doing all kinds of damage to my discs, right? And this is what people do in the name of core strength. It's not the way you want. You want to preserve the shape, but add length. And the best way, the most easy way to get a rough first pass at what you want to do is imagine you're going into a cold body of water, swimming pool, lake, ocean. And that water is coming up, and what do? When that water is coming up, you shrink up, right? Like you engage. So do that. So you start with the ready position, and now you add, and it'll be the internal obliques, the external obliques, the transversus, the multifidus, the rotatorus. It'll be exactly the combo that you need, that these people are using when they carry something heavy. And now you go and pick up your whatever, or go for your jog, or, right? Try this. This is a good way to get the right combo instead of whatever a lot of people are doing, overdoing crunches, wrong muscle. Crunches are very well named. They crunch your nerves and they crunch your discs. And they really should be thrown out. And they have been thrown out in like the Canadian Army, no crunches. US Army, if you have a back problem, no crunches. But out in the lay public, everybody's busy doing crunches and doing this to their nerves and discs. And it's not, doesn't make any sense, right? So do this one instead. This is the best ab workout you can do. And you want to jog with it, and you want to lift with it, and you want to, do all kinds of twists and dance. And anytime you're distorting your spine, make yourself extra tall so that you save yourself some. Because a combination of compression plus rotation is the worst, right? Twisting. So you go and tie your shoelaces and, you've known people, right? They get stuck there and then they're in the emergency room. No need. Add length. And now twisting is actually good for you if you've got length. It's only compression plus twisting that causes problems. So you want to do what the Beal guys are doing. Not tucking your pelvis, rounding your upper back increasingly. The other problem with tucking the pelvis is now your bum can't work. It's disadvantaged. So you're going to use your quads to walk, and it's going to get weaker here by the year, and that's no good at all. So there are places in the world where they age really well. So this guy is in his 60s. He's a dish carregador. That's in Portugal. They used to carry fish. It's a whole profession. Yeah. But notice that behind his behind, he's got a J spine, and he's using his glutes with every step that he takes. So every step is a rep. That's how you get your glute work done. I told you how you get your ab work done. Like, periodically during the day you have something heavy. That's where you get exactly the right abs strengthened. And then for glutes, you really need to learn how to walk. So this was about 6 years ago. I was in East India, the part that has the most tribal culture in place. So look at the way this woman walks. She's got her J spine, her behind's behind, available for contraction. And so and including glute med. Glute med is the one that raises your bump. You want that to work with every step you take. Yeah? You can try it. You can lean forward, take a step. It's nuanced. Don't expect to master this in one fell swoop. But notice that she's not using her quads. She's not kicking out her leg. The front leg is chill. It's the posterior chain that works. You're squeezing yourself, propelling yourself forward, and then you're squeezing glute med to land you very softly, like a good hunter-gatherer would. Like they can't go crashing around the savannah announcing their arrival, and they wouldn't survive, right? So it's all in the posterior chain to propel you forward and provide the brakes so that you're landing softly. These people do it, and we can copy them and learn. And we really, really want to learn, because there's just too much of a cost when you don't know how to be in your body. If you're bending like this is not going to bode well. And if you're round, those are the two bad places to bend, here and there. So that's another time where surgeons get in trouble, is by rounding in the right place. This guy is in Portugal. He's a mill owner. He's 82. He changes his own stones, and he carries his own flour and all of that. Notice how he's bending really nicely. It's all at the hip hinge. Put that on your bucket list. Yeah, especially if you're a surgeon, you cannot afford to not know how to bend. And first you need to have a good structure, then you need to maintain it. And it's not this bending with the knees nonsense, doesn't make any sense, right? How are you supposed to do surgery with bending with your knees? It doesn't even, right? And your knees are not your strongest joint, yeah? It's your hips need that. And people used to bend right. At least some people did. He's not doing so well, but look at this. It's nice, right? So it's been done before. It's being done today in some parts of the world. These people bend 7 to 9 hours every day, no problems, right? You see the groove, even groove in the spine, no change in the spinal shape. So first get your spinal shape really nice, get your J-spine, and then you maintain it into bending. And we do this in some corners of modern society where there's a culture where they've passed down these traditions. You know, football players, Olympic weightlifters, they know how to bend. You have to know how to bend. But you can make changes. So this is a Stanford graduate student who had had surgery on her back actually and was not able to work on her thesis, miserable, sitting. And that's her spinal sheet. The blue is before, the gold is after, where she was pain-free, totally able to function fine. So we see, we bring, like this was a high school student who had a severe back problem and then was depressed about it and dropped out of track team, dropped out of school, and this was 6 lessons later. So big change possible if you do the right things. This is also before and after. Like you can see the behind is now behind, and that's what allows the upper body to line up better. That's critical. You really want the pelvis to be well served. And you have examples from your history. You know, do not hide behind the notion that, oh, I'm a surgeon, I'm doomed, you know, as far as my musculoskeletal system goes. Not true. You can do very well. In fact, you have a kind of gym, natural gym, right, to exercise your bending and structure on. Lister. So that's all I have. If anybody has questions, wants me to show them something, I'm very, very happy to do that. It's been a pleasure.